This thunder came from a congressional hearing room deep inside the Rayburn Building, marble columns towering, the polished oak floor gleaming under sterile fluorescent lights, and the air thick with political tension. The kind of tension you could feel on your skin like static. Cameras hummed like insects, hundreds of eyes glued to live feeds, waiting, anticipating. A storm was coming. Senator John Kennedy, a silver-haired Republican with a drawl as smooth as bourbon and a tongue sharp as a whip, sat with his spectacles resting low on his nose. He was an old-school Louisiana politician, witty, cagey, and fiercely protective of his ideals. To some, he was a principled firebrand. To others, a calculated disruptor. Years of public service had made him a master of deflection, but underneath the clever quips and country charm was a man who feared the changing tides, a man clinging to tradition like it was a life raft in the middle of a cultural hurricane. Across the room sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, young by Washington standards, but not green. Her presence was electric, bold red blazer, thick curls pinned back in a way that framed her determined eyes, and a voice that didn't shake. A former civil rights attorney from Texas, Jasmine had earned her stripes in courtrooms where justice was never guaranteed, especially for those who looked like her. Her rise in politics wasn't fueled by legacy, but by grit, strategy, and a deep, unshakable belief in the power of truth. She knew how to fight not just for herself, but for those who never got the mic. The hearing that morning had been billed as a routine oversight on federal policing practices, but everyone knew that was just the scaffolding. Underneath was a deeper clash, one about the soul of American justice, race, power, and whose voice mattered in the room. It started civilly enough. Kennedy, flipping through a thick binder, lobbed pointed questions at a witness. Crockett, seated 3 spots away, scribbled notes, lips pursed, biding her time. She didn't like playing defense. She liked facts, directness, and not mincing words. But she also knew how to wait. That patience would snap 20 minutes in. Kennedy raised his voice, leaning into a line of questioning that wasn't just contentious, it was loaded. "Congresswoman," he began, flipping the narrative without preamble. "You say you support law enforcement, accountability. But your party, your policies, what they do is vilify the police while cities burn. Do you not see the hypocrisy?" The room went still. Crockett looked up slowly, her pen pausing mid-stroke. There was no tremble in her hand, just a quiet, rising fire behind her eyes. She removed her glasses with care, placed them gently on the desk. Her voice was low, at first controlled, deliberate. "Senator Kennedy, with all due respect, if cities are burning, maybe it's not because of the people asking for justice. Maybe it's because the system keeps stepping on their necks. And I don't recall anyone questioning your party's support for insurrectionists on January 6th. The oxygen in the room evaporated. Kennedy leaned forward, his lips twisting into a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I don't need a lecture on morality from someone who—" "You do need a lecture," she cut in, her voice rising. "You absolutely do." That's when it happened. The moment that would echo across headlines, social media feeds, and kitchen tables across America. Crockett didn't yell. She didn't rant. But what she did was lay him bare, not with insults, but with brutal clarity. "My uncle was arrested when I was 9, she said. Wrong place, wrong time. No trial. 2 years before they dropped the charges, he lost everything. You want to talk about burning cities? Let's talk about the slow burn, the one that happens when whole communities live under the weight of a system that sees them as disposable." Her voice cracked slightly at disposable, and that small break in tone made the moment feel like a gut punch. "Real, raw, human. I'm not here to protect your comfort," she continued. "I'm here because someone has to tell the truth, even if it makes powerful men like you uncomfortable." The clip went viral before the hearing even adjourned. Millions watched, replayed, shared. Jasmine Crockett body slams John Kennedy became the headline, but for Jasmine, it wasn't about that. It wasn't about owning anyone. It was about saying what needed to be said, in a room that too often forgot the people it was supposed to serve. But behind the scenes, the fallout hit hard. Back in her office, the adrenaline faded. Jasmine sat at her desk, hands trembling slightly. Her chief of staff, Molokan, old friend from law school, sat opposite her, silent. He could tell she was exhausted. Not just from the hearing, but from the weight of having to always be on. Always polished. Always defending, not just her words, but her existence. "Do you think I went too far?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Malik paused. "No," he said, "but I think you let them see too much of you. And that's the part they'll try to punish." Meanwhile, Kennedy returned to his office, irritated, not just at being challenged, but at how unprepared he had been for her. In his mind, he still saw politics as a chessboard, not a battlefield. But Crockett hadn't played the game. She flipped the board. His aide, Charles, hovered nearby. "Want us to release a statement? Push back?" Kennedy sighed, removing his glasses. "No, let it ride. Let the internet have its moment." But something shifted in him that night. He watched the clip on his phone, watched her eyes, the pain behind the strength, and while he didn't say it aloud, a part of him long buried felt something foreign. Not guilt, not regret, but maybe respect. 2 days later, Crockett received a letter. It wasn't public, hand-delivered, no fanfare. "Congresswoman Crockett, though we clearly disagree, your passion is evident. I underestimated you. That won't happen again." Senator J. Kennedy, she smiled. Not because he had finally acknowledged her, but because she hadn't needed his permission to speak truth in the first place. That night, Jasmine called her mother. Told her she was tired. Told her she missed home. Her mum, ever wise, said, "Baby, sometimes doing what's right is what wears you out the most. But the world needs tired warriors too." There were other battles ahead. Crockett would face backlash, smear campaigns, even threats. But she'd also get letters from students, from single mothers, from retired veterans thanking her for being brave enough to be human on the record. And Kennedy. He didn't change his policies, but his rhetoric softened slightly. At the next hearing, he listened more than he spoke, not because he agreed, but because, maybe for the first time, he understood that listening could be its own kind of power. In the end, the clash wasn't really between Crockett and Kennedy. It was between two Americas, one rooted in nostalgia, the other in reckoning. And somewhere in that collision, a new conversation began. The lesson: truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just shows up uninvited, speaks calmly, and walks away with its head high. And when it does, the world listens. Even if just for a moment.